In my previous life, I was driven to ruin by my own adopted sister, Shen Xiao Qiao. My honor was destroyed, my family turned their backs on me, and I died in bitterness and loneliness. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to that fateful day. This time, I was no longer the naive girl who only knew how to cry and explain in vain. I returned with a colder heart, a sharper mind, and an unyielding determination. I stood on the stairs, holding a glass of orange juice I hadn't yet drunk. Below, Shen Qiao Qiao lay sprawled on the floor, clutching her legs and moaning, tears streaming down her face as if she had just experienced the most terrible pain of her life. Her cries echoed throughout the large mansion, making the scene utterly tragic, at least to those who didn't know the truth. My mother rushed out of the kitchen, still wearing her apron. My father hastily put down his newspaper, his face flushed with worry. My brother, Shen Hao, rushed down from upstairs like a whirlwind. They quickly surrounded Qiao Qiao, bombarding her with questions, their eyes filled with sorrow. And I still stood there, on the stairs, like a stranger in my own home. This scene was so familiar it made me want to laugh. In my previous life, it was right here on this very day that Shen Qiao Qiao had fallen and then accused me of pushing her. At that time, I could only stammer out explanations, but no one believed me. A slap from my mother, the coldness of my father, the disappointment in my brother's eyes. All of it is still deeply etched in my memory. The outcome? I was kicked out of the house, betrayed, and died in a mysterious accident. But this time, things would be different. I tightened my grip on the glass of orange juice, a slight smile playing on my lips. Keep acting, I thought to myself. Keep acting. My mother helped QQ up, her voice trembling. Are you all right? Did your sister push you? Her gaze immediately shifted to me. Cold, accusatory. No investigation needed. Shen QQ nestled into her mother's arms, her voice weak. No, Mom. My older sister just accidentally bumped into me. It sounded like she was defending me, but every word was a dagger plunged into me. My brother immediately became furious. Shen Yan, come down and apologize to your sister. I remained standing, unable to react when a voice rang out. Not from outside, but inside my head. Holding her so tightly hurts. After all this acting. You still haven't slapped that girl? I froze. It was Shen Qiao Qiao's voice, but she was still crying. I looked down and realized I wasn't the only one who heard it. My mother froze. My father stopped. My brother lowered his hand, his eyes filled with bewilderment. The whole room fell into an eerie silence. Only the fake crying and that venomous voice continued to echo in all our heads. This family is truly stupid. I fell so hard. And they still didn't deal with Shen Yan. I narrowed my eyes slightly. It turns out the gift heaven gave me wasn't the power for revenge, but a stage. And there, Shen Qiao Qiao would finally unmask herself. The atmosphere in the living room became stiflingly tense. No one spoke another word, but everyone's eyes were fixed on Shen Qiao Qiao, as if they were seeing her for the first time. She, however, seemed completely unaware of the change. I'm really fine. Just a little scratch. Qiao Qiao continued to sob, her voice soft as water, her teary eyes looking at each person with a pitiful vulnerability. But immediately, that voice echoed in our heads again, clear, sharp, and full of sarcasm. A scratch? It hurts so much. Next time you have to fall more gently. The floor was so hard today. My mother trembled slightly. Her hand, which had been resting on Qiao Qiao's shoulder, unconsciously loosened. She looked at her, her gaze no longer one of pity, but one of suspicion, even fear. Kyo, what did you just say? Her voice was hoarse. Kyo blinked blankly. I didn't say anything. Dad? Didn't say anything? My father repeated, his voice low, each word squeezed out from between his teeth. In my head, that voice echoed again, this time even louder. What's wrong with them? I didn't say anything. Or have we been discovered? It can't be. My acting was perfect. My brother took a step back, his face pale. The person who always defended Kikyu the most was now the one reacting the most strongly. Kikyu, he mumbled, as if unable to believe what he had just heard. But QQ continued acting. She trembled as she stood up, taking weak steps towards the stairs, her thin shoulders shaking slightly, looking utterly alone and pitiful. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother anyone. In the past, just seeing this scene, my whole family would have rushed over to comfort her. But today, no one moved. My father stood motionless like a statue, his eyes dull and vacant. My mother leaned against the wall, her hands clenched so tightly they turned white. Shenhao turned away, as if afraid to look any longer. Only I silently walked down the stairs. As I passed Chow Chow, she glanced at me, a sharp, venomous look, completely contrary to her outwardly weak appearance. "Sister, I'm sorry," she whispered. I smiled. A gentle, calm smile that even I found strange. "It's all right," I replied. "I understand." In my head, her voice immediately echoed. "Understand what? What is this crazy woman laughing at? Just looking at her face makes me want to punch her." I almost burst out laughing. "How interesting." Chow Chow went upstairs, her small figure gradually disappearing behind the door. When her footsteps faded, the room fell into a heavy silence. My father slumped onto the sofa, his hands covering his head. My mother remained motionless, her eyes red and swollen. Shenhao looked at me, his gaze complex and difficult to decipher. Regret, confusion, and self-reproach. I placed my glass of orange juice on the table, my voice calm. "I'm going back to my room." No one answered. They were still reeling from the shock. I turned and walked away, my steps light but decisive. As the door closed behind me, I collapsed onto the bed and burst out laughing. A hearty, liberating laugh. Finally, everything had begun. The next morning, the atmosphere in the Shen family home was eerily strange. The dining table, usually warm and bustling, was now as silent as a funeral. I went downstairs and saw everyone already seated. Shen Chow Chow was still in the center, wearing a white dress, her hair braided on both sides, her face innocent like an angel. "Sister, you're awake," she smiled brightly. "I asked someone to warm up your milk." "Thank you," I replied, pulling up a chair and sitting down. Immediately, a familiar voice echoed in my head. "Drink it." I added 3 spoonfuls of sugar. "Drink it until you're as fat as a pig." I glanced at the glass of milk in front of me, then gently pushed it away. My mother's hand, holding the chopsticks, trembled slightly. She looked at the glass of milk, then at Chow Chow, her eyes filled with conflict. "Chow Chow," my mother said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Your sister is on a diet. She doesn't drink milk with so much sugar." QQ blinked, feigning innocence. "I didn't say to remove the sugar." In her head, that voice immediately retorted, "Let her be, I'll remove it if I want to. Who said she's prettier than me?" My father slammed the newspaper down on the table. "You lie without batting an eye, don't you?" he said coldly. QQ flinched, her face turning pale. "Dad, what are you saying?" The atmosphere froze again, but this time, no one rushed to defend her anymore. I sat there, silently eating breakfast, clearly feeling every subtle change in everyone's eyes. Trust had begun to crack, and when a crack appears, collapse is only a matter of time. After that stifling breakfast, my mother unexpectedly suggested going shopping. In the past, I would have definitely found an excuse to refuse, because every time we went together, I was always just a shadow, watching her pour all her attention into Shen Chow Chow. But this time, I agreed immediately. I wanted to see how things would change when that mask gradually fell away. The shopping mall was crowded, the bright lights reflecting on the gleaming glass. We entered a luxury store. As soon as she saw the limited edition bag displayed in the middle of the counter, Shen Chow Chow's eyes lit up. She walked over, gently stroking the soft, smooth leather, her movements as tender as if she were touching a treasure. "Mom, this bag is so beautiful," she said, her voice full of regret. "But it's so expensive. I wouldn't dare ask for it, I'll just admire it." A familiar phrase. In my previous life, just hearing this, my mother would immediately pull out her card, without hesitation. But today, "What's so expensive about it? Just buy it for me. We have plenty of money, what are you being stingy about?" A sharp, sarcastic voice echoed in my head, making my mother freeze. Her hand, which was about to reach for the card, slowly stopped in midair. I stood beside her, silently observing. I clearly saw the subtle changes on her face, from hesitation to disappointment, then gradually turning cold. My mother picked up the bag, examined it for a moment, then suddenly turned to me. "Xiaoyan, what do you think of this?" I feigned surprise. "Yes, it's beautiful, but QQ likes it." My mother chuckled softly, her smile not reaching her eyes. "She said it was too expensive. She didn't dare ask for it. I have to respect that. You're the eldest sister. You'll have many social interactions later. You need something suitable." After saying that, she handed the card to the employee. "Take this one." The space seemed to freeze. The smile on Shen QQ's lips froze, her eyes filled with astonishment. "Mom, you bought this for my older sister?" In her head, a scream almost exploded. "Why her? That bag is mine! Does this bitch deserve it?" I took the bag, leisurely slung it over my shoulder, and twirled slightly in front of the mirror. "It's beautiful," I smiled. "You have good taste." Shen Kyokyo's hands gripped the hem of her dress so tightly that her knuckles turned white, but she still managed a strained smile. "It's good that you like it. I'll tear it to shreds when we get home." I turned away, hiding the smile at the corner of my lips. On the way home, the atmosphere in the car was eerily silent. My mother didn't say a word, only looked out the window, her gaze distant. As for Shen Xiao Qiao, the more silent she was, the louder her inner voice became. Shen Yan must have pulled some trick. She couldn't have changed so suddenly. I leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes. It wasn't me pulling a trick. It was... she's exposing herself. As soon as we entered the house, Auntie C ran out to announce, "Young Master Gu Yen has arrived. He's waiting in the living room." I froze for a moment. That name, like a sharp knife cutting through my memory. My fiancé, the one who betrayed me in my previous life. Beside me, Shen Xiao's eyes immediately lit up. She quickly adjusted her hair, gently pulled down her collar, revealing her delicate collarbone. "My love has arrived. I must seize the opportunity." I glanced at my mother. She closed her eyes, rubbing her forehead, as if trying to suppress a terrible headache. Entering the living room, Gu Yan stood up, a polite smile on his face. "Hello, Auntie. Hello, Xiaoyan. Hello, Chow Chow." He greeted me, but his gaze lingered on Chow Chow for a moment longer. Just one beat, but enough for me to understand. "You really want to devour her, don't you?" QQ's inner voice echoed, full of self-satisfaction. I sat down and calmly asked, "What do you want from me?" "I heard there was some trouble at home yesterday," he said, his voice feigning concern. "Did you and QQ have a fight?" I subtly raised my eyebrows. "Nothing. She just fell on her own." I turned to QQ. "Right?" She nodded quickly, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes. My older sister didn't do anything to me." "That's right. Keep acting." Chayan looked at her with a pitying gaze, then turned to me, his voice reproachful. "Xiaoyan, you're making me more tolerant. Kyokyo is so weak. You shouldn't always—" "Enough!" My mother's voice rang out, interrupting him. The room immediately fell silent. She slammed her handbag down on the table, her eyes icy cold. "Did you see my daughter bullying her?" Guyan froze. I was just worried about Chow Chow." Worried about Chow Chow? My mother chuckled. What about your fiancé? He was speechless. My mother took a step forward, her gaze sharp as a knife. Or do you have feelings for Chow Chow? The question exploded like a bomb in the living room. Guyan's face instantly turned pale. Shin Chow Chow was also stunned, her mind in turmoil. Is this old woman crazy? Why would she ask so directly? Immediately afterward, she burst into tears, rushing to hug my mother's arm. Mom, what are you saying? Guyan and I are innocent. Innocent what? You were texting each other last night. I sat there, silently observing. The drama was getting more and more interesting. And this time, the audience is no longer blind. The atmosphere in the living room was stifled by my mother's question. Guyan stood still, his polite smile freezing into an awkward crack. He opened his mouth, but his explanation was betrayed by the panic in his eyes. Auntie, you've misunderstood. I only see Chow Chow as a younger sister, he said, his voice unsteady. You younger sister? You were hugging her so much last night. Shen Chow Chow's inner voice echoed, both sarcastic and contemptuous, making my mother's face even paler. I only see him as an older brother, Chow Chow sobbed, tears falling like rain. Mom, you're saying that, poor me. A platonic older brother, more like. I subtly smirked. If it were before, this scene would have been enough to shake everyone. But now every tear she shed seemed ridiculous, every gentle word betraying the pretense within. My mother looked at the two of them, her eyes no longer concealing her disgust. All right, she said coldly. I'm tired. You can go now. Guyan was startled. Auntie, the engagement, my mother interrupted. I'll discuss it with your family later. That sentence was like a knife cutting through the last barrier. Guyan was truly panicked. He knew exactly how dependent his family's company was on the Shen family. This marriage wasn't just about feelings, but about benefits, about survival. Auntie, see him out. My mother's voice was decisive. There was no room for negotiation. Guyan had no choice but to leave. But before turning his back, his gaze secretly lingered on Shen Chow Chow, full of longing. And Kyukyo stood there, head bowed, sobbing. But in her mind, she was screaming, Useless! You didn't even say a word to defend me! The door closed. The room fell silent. But this time, it wasn't a confused silence, but a silence of clear-headedness. My mother spoke up, her voice not loud but cold enough to send shivers down my spine. She looked straight at me, her eyes unwavering, and said, Go to your room and copy the rules 100 times. Kyokyo immediately looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief, as if she couldn't believe her ears. She stammered, but my mother didn't give her a chance. She repeated, 100 times? Do you think that's enough? In her head, a deafening scream rang out. Enough? What? Are you crazy? But outwardly, she still bowed her head, her voice trembling. Yes, I know I'm wrong. Then she turned and walked away, each step heavy, her shoulders shaking slightly, not from self-pity, but from suppressed anger. I stood there silently watching her back, my heart strangely calm, because I knew very well that this was only the beginning of everything. When the door closed, only the three of us remained in the room. My mother seemed to lose all her strength, collapsing into a chair, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking with each beat. Her voice choked as she called my name. Xiao Yan, I'm sorry. I stepped forward and took her hand. Her hand was icy cold, making my heart sink slightly, but I remained gentle. I'm fine, Mom, don't be like that, I said. But my mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She choked out, For all these years, I've always thought you were jealous of your sister. That's why I was so harsh with you. I was so wrong. My father stood beside me, silent for a long time, then sighed heavily, his voice hoarse. It's my fault. I thought I was a good judge of character, but in the end, I was led astray by a child. Shen Hao stood there, clenching his fists, bowing his head low and softly saying, I'm sorry. 3 simple words. Yet it was the first time I'd heard them from my brother. I looked at them, those who had turned their backs on me in my previous life, now standing before me with obvious remorse. If it had been before, I probably would have burst into tears. But now I only smiled faintly and said, "It's not over yet." All 3 looked up at me simultaneously, their eyes filled with suspicion. My father asked, "What do you mean?" I let go of my mother's hand, slowly turned to look out the window. The afternoon sunlight shone in, reflecting off the glass in dazzling streaks, then calmly said, "QQ isn't acting alone. There's someone behind her." A familiar name flashed through my mind, Guyan, and also those who haven't revealed themselves yet. We've only seen a part of it. If we act hastily now, it will only make them more wary. My father narrowed his eyes and asked, "So what do you intend to do?" I turned back to look him straight in the eye, my gaze cold, releasing the prey to catch a bigger beast. The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't confusion, but preparation for an approaching storm, and this time I would be the one in control. After I stated the plan, no one spoke immediately, but I clearly saw the change in each person's eyes. My father's expression, which had been weary, gradually turned into the familiar coldness of someone who had weathered the storms of business. My mother, though still in pain, was no longer as panicked as before. Shenhao stood up straighter, his eyes no longer hesitant, but instead showing a rare composure. My father slowly asked, "Where do you intend to start?" I didn't answer immediately, but walked to the table, poured a glass of water, placed it down, and said each word clearly. "Let her think that everything is still under control. The more complacent she is, the easier it is to reveal her weaknesses." Shenhao frowned. "You mean pretend you don't know anything?" I nodded slightly. "Yes, let her continue the act. But this time the audience is no longer the fool, but the one holding the script." My father pondered for a moment, then nodded. "Okay then, do as you wish." In the following days, everything in the Shen family became strangely indescribable. On the surface, it was still a normal family, but inside, everyone was secretly observing Shen Chao Chao's every move. She seemed to sense something was wrong, so she tried even harder to play the role of a sweet and obedient girl. Every morning, she woke up early to prepare meals, proactively serving food to everyone, asking about their well-being and showing concern. If it weren't for the inner voices in her head, perhaps everyone would have been fooled again. "Eat quickly, die sooner. Just look at that hateful face." Her sharp, sarcastic voice made my mother's hand freeze in midair. But she said nothing, silently putting down her chopsticks. My father remained calm, reading the newspaper as if nothing had happened. But I knew he was memorizing every little detail. That afternoon, I was sitting reading in the garden when I saw a familiar figure stealthily approaching my father's study. Shen Chao Chao looked around cautiously, then gently opened the door and stepped inside. A glint flashed in her eyes. Calculating, I didn't rush to follow them, silently taking out my phone to send my father and brother a short message. "There's a good show." Less than 10 minutes later, hurried footsteps echoed from the hallway. My father and Shen Hao appeared just as the office door opened. Shen Chao Chao stepped out, holding a stack of documents she hadn't had time to hide. Seeing the two of them, she was startled, dropping the papers to the ground, her face instantly turning pale. My father looked at her, his eyes darkening. "What are you doing here?" Chao Chao stammered. "I was just looking for a book to read." I saw the door wasn't locked, so I came in to take a look. In her head, she thought, "Oh no, why are these two back so early?" I just finished taking pictures of the design. She had to find a way to deny it immediately. My father bent down to pick up the documents, his voice icy cold. "These are confidential documents. You came in looking for a book and you touched this?" Chao Chao blinked repeatedly, trying to remain calm. "I saw it was messy, so I was just tidying it up." "I didn't know it was important documents." In her head, she chuckled coldly. "Confidential? What? Sell this and you'll make a ton of money." This old man is right. That's really stupid. I stood silently by the window as the evening light faded, casting shadows into every corner of the room. signaling that what was about to happen was no longer simple. Behind QQ was a whole network, the consequences of which I had already experienced in my previous life. This time, I wouldn't repeat the same mistakes. My father was the first to break the silence. He asked me what I intended to do next, his voice low but no longer imposing as before, instead cautious and trusting. I turned to look at them one by one, then slowly said, "Let's pretend we know nothing. Let everything happen naturally." My mother flinched slightly. She asked if that was too dangerous. I shook my head, saying it was indeed dangerous, but if we didn't do this, we would never know who the real mastermind was. Shen Hao clenched his fist as if wanting to say something but then stopped, just standing silently and listening. I told them that from now on they had to be careful. Every action, every word could be monitored. QQ wouldn't give up easily, and those behind her certainly wouldn't sit idly by when their plan was shaken. Night. That day, the house seemed quiet, but in reality, it was the beginning of a new game of chess. Each person harbored their own thoughts, while I knew exactly what my next move would be. Elsewhere, QQ sat in her room, the light casting a shadow over her face, contorted with anger. She threw her notebook to the ground, her breath coming in ragged gasps, then tremblingly took out her phone and dialed a familiar number. A low voice on the other end asked what had happened. QQ gritted her teeth and said, "The plan has gone wrong. Xiaoyan isn't as simple as we think." The other end was silent for a few seconds. Then a cold, mocking laugh escaped, saying, "So that's interesting. It seems this game has begun." Kyokyo clutched the phone tightly, her eyes filled with resentment, saying she would definitely not let things end like this. Meanwhile, I stood in the shadows, gently closing my eyes before opening them again, my gaze calm but cold. This time, no one could escape the consequences of their actions, not Gu Yan or anyone behind it. The game had begun, and I would be the one. Finish it. The following days passed seemingly peacefully, but in reality, every small detail was shifting along a trajectory I had secretly orchestrated. QQ began to behave better in front of others, no longer causing trouble or trying to confront me directly. However, this unusual quietness made others lower their guard. But I didn't. I knew she was waiting, just as I was waiting, only she didn't know she was walking into a trap that had been set. One afternoon, as I returned to my room, my phone vibrated slightly. A strange message, just a few short words. "Tonight at 8 o'clock, go out alone." I looked at the screen for a few seconds, then subtly curved my lips. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. Light footsteps echoed in the hallway. I turned off the screen as if nothing had happened. The door opened, and QQ stood there, her face bearing a feigned expression of concern, asking if I wanted to come down for dinner. I looked at her for a moment, then nodded as usual. Our eyes met for a brief moment, enough for me to see. I noticed the scrutiny and impatience were very well concealed. Dinner was strangely peaceful. My father occasionally looked at me as if he wanted to ask something, but then stopped. My mother hadn't fully recovered her composure yet, and Shen Hao was quieter than usual. At 8 o'clock in the evening, I changed into a light jacket and quietly left the house. No one stopped me because they had chosen to trust me. The road outside was deserted, the yellow streetlights casting long shadows of me on the ground. I walked to the meeting point, an empty plot of land behind the old row of houses where very few people passed by. When I stopped, a figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't Kyokyo. It was a strange man, yet his eyes were strangely familiar, almost hateful. He looked at me, then chuckled softly, saying, "Finally, we've met." I stood still, not backing down, and simply asked, "Who are you?" He didn't answer immediately, but slowly approached, step by step, as if savoring the tension in the air, before saying, "You don't need to know who I am. You only need to know that someone wants you to disappear." The night wind blew coldly, but I felt unusually clear-headed. I tilted my head slightly and asked, "So, is that Gu Yan?" The man's gaze froze for a brief moment, but enough for me to confirm my answer. I chuckled softly, saying, "It seems I guessed correctly." He lost his initial composure, his voice lowering as he asked, "How much do you really know?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Enough to leave you with no way out." The atmosphere froze. The next second, hurried footsteps echoed from behind. Crushed. Not just one person, but many people. I let out a slow sigh. The trap has closed, and this time, the prey has no escape. The figures quickly surrounded me, their flashlight beams sweeping through the darkness, creating blinding streaks of light. The man in front of me visibly changed expression. He instinctively recoiled, but it was too late. From the crowd, my father emerged, his face stern. Behind him were Shen Hao and several other familiar faces, all prepared beforehand. The man gritted his teeth and asked when I had set the trap. I calmly replied that from the moment I received the message, I knew this wasn't a simple meeting. He sneered, saying, "Even so, you have no evidence." I didn't answer, only slightly tilting my head. At that moment, another voice rang out from behind the crowd. Gu Yan stepped out. His face remained as calm as ever, but his eyes no longer held the composure they once did. He looked at me for a long time before speaking, saying, "It seems I underestimated you." I looked directly at him, not avoiding his gaze, and said, "It's not that you underestimated me, but that you were too confident in your game." The atmosphere became suffocatingly tense. My father asked Guyan in a low voice what he really wanted to do. Guyan chuckled softly, saying it was just a small misunderstanding, not worth making a big deal out of. I laughed lightly, saying that if it was just a misunderstanding, why resort to this method? His eyes darkened, but he maintained a calm tone, asking me what I wanted. I didn't answer immediately, just looked around, then slowly said that I wanted everything exposed. One of my father's group stepped forward, holding out a phone and playing a recording. Chow Chow's voice rang out clearly, word for word, leaving no room for denial. Guyan's expression finally changed. He was silent for a few seconds, then laughed. But this time it wasn't gentle. It carried a distinct coldness. He said, "Even so, do you think just these things can bring me down?" I looked at him, my eyes unwavering, and said, "This is just the beginning." From afar, the sound of police sirens blared. They were getting closer and closer. Guyan turned his head to look in the direction of the sound, then looked back at me, his eyes becoming cold. He said that I was indeed not the same as before. I replied that this time I wouldn't let anyone manipulate me again. The horn stopped, and the red and green lights reflected on everyone's faces. Everything finally came to an end. Guyan was taken away, but before leaving, he turned back to look at me one last time, his eyes filled with something unreadable. I stood still, watching until his figure completely disappeared into the night. The night wind still blew, but this time it wasn't as cold as before. I gently closed my eyes, then opened them again. It was all over, but it was also a new beginning. And this time, I will live my life my own way, never letting the past bind me again.